Hi, Jonica, how are you?
I'm good, Guy. Thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you. Very well. So today we've got Fox and Fox Mayfield, and we have four of your lovely sparkling wines that we're going to go through. I think it would be a nice way to start the tasting to get an intro on yourself and your husband, because you haven't had the normal background into wine, as it were. You both had other careers. So if you could bring us up to speed.
Yes, we're both portfolio people, really. So my husband was a city slicker for far too long, and now he's an expert in alternative energies and green investment policies, those sorts of things. It's slightly too clever for me half the time. But after he left the city, he went and did a master's degree in the policy and economics of the environment, which sounds very grand. And I kind of got lost halfway through that title. So all I can tell you is he's very clever and he works very hard. And my background was media and marketing. And so we both came at things from very different angles, but they've been good skill sets to carry forward. So he's got a very good strategic brain and he is sensitive to markets, so he's very useful in terms of saying, I think this might happen, I think that might happen. And I think the combination of that plus, frankly, oddly enough, my love for cooking has given us an ability to be very clear about the sort of wines that we want to make together. And so it's been quite a fun journey. Most of the time we play very nicely. Occasionally we bark at each other, but he does everything from being top tractor driver to being my personal consultant, and I do the reverse. So I do the paperwork and then cooperate on other things with him.
Well, as always, it's a team effort, and so it is just the two of you, except I presume at harvest time when you get some help to come in.
We have some extra help. We have a number of people who work for us, mostly part-time on their own terms rather than as direct employees, but they are effectively very, very much part of our team and we couldn't live without them. So we have a hidden team, I think is the best way of saying it. Probably the one that most of our visitors, when we have visitors, would come across would be Emma, who's our vineyard manager. So she, like myself, went to Plumpton and did a degree in viticulture. Like Gerard, she has a master's degree, and like Gerard, she's very good in the tractor. But she is a excellent viticulturalist, and so we occasionally bicker with each other, but most of the time we're in agreement about the best way to grow our grapes, and that's what matters. And then at harvest time, we rely on all sorts of people to come and help us.
Okay. And how big is the vineyard?
Well, we've changed our business strategy. So we started with the vineyard that we still have, and that's just under a couple of hectares. We then planted and developed a second vineyard, which was about 25 acres roughly. But we sold that at the start of last year. And we now work with a number of growers who I've known for a long time and trust. And we're buying in some grapes to supplement what we grow here. But we've about 8,000 vines or thereabouts here. So, we take a decent crop off one vineyard and then we supplement with others.
Sure. I mean, there's still plenty of work for you, to manage it with the team effort, as you've mentioned.
It is a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun. And when it's not raining, it's lovely to be working outside. When it is raining, I suddenly have this fascination with the accounts. But Emma gets wet. No, it's a lot of work, but I think we still find it exciting. When I first started, I did the course at Plumpton and wished that we had a heritage of grape growing in the UK so that I could turn to some nice grandpa-like figure who'd seen it all before. Now that I've been a grower for quite some time, I'm actually a little bit more confident, but also actually very grateful for the freedom that being a pioneer sector gives you. And one of the best things about it is that I've made so many good friends in the English wine world and beyond, because we've all asked each other questions all of the time. And so it's a very collegiate and very convivial way of working. There's competition, but it's constructive competition, if that makes sense.
It does, and it's something I've heard a lot, how flexible our industry currently is compared to a lot of the other wine regions around the world, where they do have very strict laws. The English wine industry is still has the ability to explore and develop a bit more, which backs up from what you're saying.
Well, I think it's one of those amazingly exciting things for new industries. When the English wine renaissance started, we had the advantage in that researching sparkling wine worldwide, tasting sparkling wine worldwide, talking to winemakers who made sparkling wine worldwide, one was able to develop a philosophy and a way of working that allowed us to, frankly, jump a lot of hurdles, I think, and start with that sense of adventure, but also the ability to take the best of what other people were doing. And so I think that's very exciting for us. And that's where the no rules comes in. We're not stuck having to do, you know, a blend which is X% of this grape or Y% of that grape. And we're not restricted in the grapes that we grow. So although we don't grow it, other English growers are making a great success of Bacchus. There are some exciting grapes being planted in the UK at the moment that wouldn't have been considered 10 years ago. And I think that's a really healthy and dynamic situation. So I think there's a lot to play for at the moment. It's fun, it's interesting, and occasionally it's very scary.
I completely agree. It's nice that our industry has the ability to be flexible and to explore and to try these different varieties without having a lot of the restrictions and rules that other parts in Europe have. So it's great that it's working for you guys.
Well, I think we're lucky. Gerard and I came into the wine world because we both loved wine as amateurs. I mean, honestly, amateurs. And because we were both working quite hard in quite London-y types of jobs, we had access to amazing wines in restaurants and wine bars. And we were absolutely fascinated by the different tastes, the different terroir, the different stories behind the wine. And, you know, I think that gave us a good foundation to build on. So when we first started talking about a vineyard, and it was very much Gerard's idea, he came home and said, I think we should plant a vineyard. You can do it. And I was like, maybe, don't know. And then he said, well, look, you know, you could go to Plumpton, they do a short course. And so I went, and I came back after the 5 days and went, this is absolutely fascinating. I love growing things anyway. And so to suddenly have something that was quite so interesting as a plant was quite thrilling, actually, to be honest. And I came back and said, well, you know, 5 days was fascinating, but it's actually very, very technical stuff. And I don't think I learned enough. And so my husband said, well, why don't you go and sign up for the full course? And at that stage, it was a foundation course. Yeah. So my year at Plumpton were the first that did a full BSc course. And that was fun in its own right. So, you know, it was a good place to start.
I mean, I hear a lot of good things about Plumpton. We've done some work with them as well. And it is a great college and place for people just to go learn about wine, explore wine, and learn from very knowledgeable people who have had a wealth of experience and are happy to share. And that's what's great about wine, is people sharing the stories, the passion, the you know, the interest and everything that they've learned, because it is a hands down, passing down, excuse me, approach. I think that's the great way to start trying some of your wines. Where would you like to start, Jonica?
Well, let's start with inspiration.
Sure.
So this is inspiration, with its very beautiful pale blue label. And inspiration is simply called inspiration because we were walking through the vineyard together, and I was showing Gerard how beautiful the Pinot Gris was. And he was tasting berries going, gosh, this is amazing. And I said, well, I think we should make a wine out of it. And so he said, well, that's a little unorthodox, that's not what the great champagne houses do, etc., etc., etc. And I said, well, we planted it, we should use it. And so we did. And because we were inspired by the grapes, we called it inspiration. But I like it because I wanted to have a wine in our repertoire which was really nice with slightly more contemporary styles of food. So it goes very well with anything that has chili and ginger and lemongrass, something thrown into a wok, something with a little bit of spice to it. It still goes beautifully with fish and chips. It goes very beautifully with the most wonderful sort of French style fish with cream sauces and what have you, but it is fresh enough and spicy enough to go with other things as well. And I think that's kind of important at the moment. So when you taste it, I think you get quite a pretty, quite aromatic nose, followed by a hit of fruit, but the background notes bring out the ginger and honey that's naturally present in the Pinot Gris.
What I noticed immediately was the aromas, how pronounced they are. There's a lot of definition there. Sometimes they can be a little muddled.
Sorry.
Bless you. Bless you.
I'm so sorry about that.
Not at all.
Not my normal voice.
Yes, it's got really lovely development on the nose, and that's quite surprising. And I noticed it's got a bit of age on it as well. I think it was 2014.
So this is a 2014, and it was disgorged in November 2019. So I like to have a bit of time under cork on my wines as well to integrate everything. And I think it's really showing what it can do at the moment. For me, it's that nice balance of being a wine you can give to people feeling confident that they're going to enjoy it, because it's rounded and it's got some fruit to the front of it, but it's also got those nice shortbready notes coming through from the lees aging. And I think the texture of it is pleasing. And so it's one of those wines where it's what I call a more pleased wine. You have a little sip, you have a glass of it, you think, I could have a bit more of that. So that was the intention behind it, anyway.
No, I completely agree. It's definitely Moorish. I think what I love that it's got a really nice balance between the citrus, and then you really pick up on these slightly extended aging that you're talking about, because there's a lot of texture there. There's quite a bit of depth to the body. And it's interesting to have, wine that you have aged for that period of time on the lees, because it does come out through the palate. It really does, with that texture.
Well, I think that it adds quite a lot, and we make our wines in a very low manipulation way. I don't like mucking around with stuff. We pick beautiful grapes, we get them to the winery quickly, and we have the winemaking starting immediately. So everything's pressed and in tank within a few hours of getting to the winery. It's not sitting around and worrying about stuff. It's just, treated properly. And so because we make small batch wines, it's relatively low risk for us to do it without having to spend a lot of time using additives and treatments. So for us, time on lees is really important, because we don't do things like malolactics. And so that starts to bring the acidity back into balance with the quality of the fruit at the beginning. And I think it's an important part of the way we make our wines. So we're not natural winemakers, we do use commercial yeast. And I think for us, that's important because the yeast we use is one that doesn't add flavors of its own. It's very good at showcasing the flavors of the grapes. And so you get a nice experience like the lineup you have behind you, where people can taste same vineyard, same winemaker, same vintage, but the grape has changed. So you can taste what Chardonnay tastes like. You can taste what Pinot Noir tastes like. We do a Meunier as well. You can taste what happens when we blend, and you can taste what Pinot Gris tastes like. And so that's quite exciting, I think, for people to discover that they're getting the real sense of what those individual grapes deliver into a wine.
I think what you're mentioning is a lot of, you're allowing the grape to show itself. You know, there's still a lot. I mean, even this wine, there's still a lot of fruit there. There's a really nice definition to the wine. It hasn't been lost because, I mean, what did we say? Is it 6 years? I think, yeah, 2014 or just a bit more. And sometimes wines can lose the crisp freshness, and I think the English wine industry, I think that's a real key advantage to our wines, is the freshness. And I don't think we should lose that as a star, because it means that they're great for pairing with so many different types of food, where they cut through fatty elements that other wines don't. Particularly with sparkling wines, having them through a meal is something I've raved about to many people. It's a great thing to do and not often thought about outside of the industry. And that's where, when you have a wine like this, which has the definition to it, it has that sharp's really the wrong way, but a crisp edge to it, it will cut through some of the fattier dishes. But this, I think this is just a great toasting wine. You know, it's a really nice, well-balanced, beautiful texture to it, but it's again, even though it's had a bit of aging, it's still fresh, and that's key.
Yeah.
I really think that's key.
Yeah. And as I say, it goes very well when you're putting it up against quite robust flavors like chili and ginger and garlic. It has enough weight to go against them, but at the same time, I think it makes a nice aperitif. So we serve this just as a glass of wine, or we serve it with food, and it works both ways. I'm particularly keen on having some woked up prawns with it, because I think the texture of the prawns and the flavor of the prawns with some chili, you know, those chili ginger, Far Eastern spice notes is just a lovely combination. But I think it's just a really fascinating example of what Pinot Gris can do, and I'm excited that so many more people are beginning to plant it in the UK.
I agree, and it's great that you guys have put this wine out there for people to discover and explore. And as you say, more and more people are now growing that great variety too. I mean, what a great way to start the tasting, and it's very Moorish as well. That's what I'm picking up on. Like, it's one of those you do want to reach for the glass, and that's always key.
Excellent. That's exactly the reaction I want. When we're making wines, we think about the flavor profile, and because we grow on clay, my personal thesis is that clay produces richer flavored fruit. And I think that what I want is, I want people to have a glass. I want them to enjoy the aroma. I like a pretty nose. It has to be something which is inviting. I don't want a lot of lager and Marmite running around. I want apple blossom and pretty things. And then when you take a sip, the first thing you should be thinking about is the fruit on the front of the tongue. Then we have usually a very small, rich mousse, so you get that lovely sensation going through your mouth. And then when you get to the finish, it's long and it's uplifting. And so it leaves you going, gosh, actually, that was lovely. That made me feel better. I'm refreshed. You know, I'm on for the next thing. What's happening? There's lovely conversation going on. You know, it brings that sort of sense of joie de vivre, which I wish somebody could translate beautifully into English, but I haven't found a good alternative to saying it yet. And I think that's really the heart of why we make fizz. You know, it's all about that sense of bringing a little moment of extra pleasure and happiness to people.
I agree.
So there's the uplifting finish.
Yeah, it's and a lot of with the sparkling wines, and particularly the English sparkling wines is they can be quite fun wines. You know, you can go into as much detail as you want, and you can be very complex and analyze them. There's a lot going on there, but sometimes it's nice to think this is just a very nice, fun wine that I just want to drink and I want to enjoy. And I get that with this wine. This is a wine that just knock it back, which is a great way for that to be.
I have to say, it's quite easy to go through a couple of bottles if you're with friends and having a happy time. So that was inspiration, which is Pinot Gris. The next one to taste is CV. So this is Chairman's Vat. This is Gerard's own blend. And this was him thinking about showing what our vineyards produce in one go. So this is all of the grapes that we have blended in roughly the proportions that we grow them. And I think it's a lovely essay in a blended fizz. I'm going to let you taste it and see what you think of it.
I was just noticing, is that part of the reason behind the different colour in the label? Because obviously that one's much bolder. Is that something to do with that? Or
yes,
is that...
our limited editions, I go mad with the colours. So our Pinot Meunier is in a very papal purple label. The CV has the bright blue, and there are some other lovely colours in the line for future limited editions when they appear.
Well, the first thing that I pick up from this sparkling wine is that, again, there's a nice development on the nose, and there's a bit more texture to it than the first one. There's more depth. It's slightly more cooked fruit, and
you get a certain amount of the baked apple of Pinot Noir coming through in it.
Absolutely.
And that's balancing. So what you're getting is you get the top notes of Pinot Gris on the aroma. Then you get, I think, the Pinot Noir coming through. And then you'll get the Chardonnay balancing out at the end.
It's definitely more along the lines of like apple strudel or apple crumble. It's that cooked notes of where you still have the sweet acidity of the fruit, but it's calmed down a bit, and it's got a lovely texture to it. And what's interesting is how fresh this wine is. It's still got a lot of freshness.
It is, and it's, you know, that's, I think, because we don't muck around with it too much, and you get the citrus notes of the Chardonnay within it, balancing the red fruit notes and the ripe appleness of the Pinot Noir. And those two are kind of obvious in the wine, but what you don't pick up so easily, because it's in a much smaller quantity within the wine, is the Pinot Meunier Blanc de Noir, which adds that, it sort of adds to it because it's got this little bit of black fruit running through underneath it as well. And so for me, it broadens out the flavour spectrum and actually does make it probably a bit richer than the inspiration. But it's a lovely little wine. I think Gerard did really well with it. I'm very happy with this wine.
I think you should be. It's one of the things that jumped out to me was I actually got rhubarb crumble. The lovely sweetness with the slight
description
fruit, and which was a really lovely balance, because it's important that you have that balance, because you know when particularly within wine, if it's out of kink, it can where it just tastes off, it doesn't work. But this had that lovely zing, the lovely sweetness to back it up, and then this slight hint of earthiness, which gives it much more of a developed texture on the tongue, much fuller body to it.
That's the Meunier underpinning it. So you get that slightly sort of, it's wrong to say mushroom because it's too much of a distinct flavour, but you're edging slightly towards that rather rich, mushroomy, slightly savoury note that just sits underneath everything else.
I think, sorry, I was going to say, I think for me, it's definitely more the like the cooked apple strudel. You know, it really is that. And then with the rhubarb, and it's that really sweet, soft cooked element with the crumble on top. It's all there. It's very interesting compared to the previous one, just the slight differences in the texture and the development on how it's pronouncing, or rather coming through on the tongue. A slightly bit more dryingness to it as well. So I don't know what the alcohol is on that one.
The alcohols are about the same,
Okay.
but there's a difference in dosage. So Inspiration has 9.5 grams per litre, and this has 8.5. So you should actually, although it's interesting because of the fruit, people go, gosh, that's possibly slightly sweeter. In fact, it's actually, technically, it's drier. But it's part of the joy of this particular wine is that I think it delivers a voluptuousness which is underpinned by a nice little bit of precision, and so it just pulls it back from being sweet and blousy to being something where it's probably more slightly honeyed rather than sweet, and then you get the zing and the zest of the fruits that we grow so well in this country. You've got rhubarb, you've got red currant, apple, as you've already mentioned, and I think those sorts of things which have a natural tanginess to them have combined really well in this particular cuvee. But I'm glad you like it. That's the most important thing.
What I wanted to pick up on what you're saying that on there was the precision of the wine, and I think that's key. It's something I talk a lot about with English sparkling wine. When I use the word definition, it's obviously the same, but it's important to retain that edge, to have that defining elements to our sparkling wines, which, as you mentioned, you use the word precision. So, and again, this does retain it. And then for me, that's having the zing, but it can't drop off. It has to be lasting, it has to be smooth, it has to be consistent within the wine. And I mean, this does have a very pleasing finish to it. It really does. And again, another Moorish wine, which is something I long for in wine. So I'm very pleased it's there. Yeah, excellent.